Front head.
Oh, nice. That's our school of journalism. Okay, thanks.
That's feel
You're
good.
welcome.
No more tuition for me.
Is that your youngest daughter?
Yeah, they both well, yeah, she graduated first.
Okay.
And then the older one graduated 23.
Okay.
April from Central.
I still got 4 or 5 years.
Okay, 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Lucky Andy, my phone didn't break. Good job.
And my oldest just applied for medical school in Cyprus.
Oh, is that what's going on in Italy?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, she's studying over there, and then she's looking at also other universities to transfer.
Okay,
Great. Well, it's 6 o'clock and I'm gonna call this Lacey City Council work session to order on April 9th. I also want to acknowledge that Councilmember Greenstein is excused, but the rest of the council is present. And also, we, the city of Lacey, are on the ancestral land of the tribal people, the Treaty of Messing Creek, including the Nisqually tribe and the Squaxin tribe. That can I get a motion to approve this evening's agenda?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Then that motion unanimously carries. We have an approved agenda. First up on our approved agenda is our joint animal services update. Sarah.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you so much for having me. Oh, we did that wrong. Sorry. So thank you so much for having me this evening. Today I am talking about our overarching animal services update to share all of our 2023 successes and challenges with the city of Lacey. So first off, though, just as a little quick reminder with some definitions, I know sometimes people can interchange jazz and JASCOM for the same thing. So JAS, Joint Animal Services, or JAS, is Thurston County's primary regional animal shelter and animal control agency. The Joint Animal Service Commission, also known as JASCOM, is the governing body for Joint Animal Services. It comprises of our 4 jurisdictions that are a part of our interlocal agreement, which is Olympia, Lacey, Tumwater, and Thurston County. We also have appointed positions onto the commission that are community appointed positions. One is a community veterinarian. One is a member of the Thurston County Humane Society, and another appointed member is an animal welfare organization with the same mission, vision, values. We also do have contract jurisdictions. So currently we contract with 3 different entities. We contract with JBLM. We contract with the city of Yelm, and then we most recently are going to be contracting with the Nisqually tribe as well to provide services. So most people, when they think of animal services, they think of stray animals, adoption, humane law enforcement, and maybe licensing. But there is so much more that entails the services that we provide, from advocacy to foster to volunteering. We also provide a pet pantry, veterinary care, humane education, low-income spay neuter vouchers, and many, many more programs. So what people assume is just really the tip of the iceberg of all the other programming that we provide for the community. So some of our most recent accomplishments: last year, we were able to hire a staff veterinarian. This is the first time in 40 years Joint Animal Services has had a veterinarian. And already within 2023, she became a fully staff member in December, but she was doing relief for us for several months prior. So we were actually able to do over 60% of all of our spay neuters last year in-house, which is a huge accomplishment. Prior to this, we were contracting with all the local veterinarians, having to transport those animals for their spay and neuter, and sometimes all the way up to Tacoma and Linwood as well for their spay neuter surgeries. So this is a huge win for us, a great way for us to do business as well. It's a good cost savings for us. And we were also able to do 50% more medical treatments in-house rather than having to send out to clinics. And with that, we did actually over 600 in spay neuter surgeries from June through December. We also advocated for 2 bills last year, one being HB 1424, which is consumer protections concerning the sales of dogs and cats. And we also advocated for HB 1234, which was concerning the civil forfeiture of animals in terms of seizures and animal cruelty. This one outlined and made things clearer for both the owners whose animals were being seized, as well as law enforcement agencies, as far as what the rights were and who maintained ownership and what those requirements were. We also went to over 20 community events throughout Thurston County and held several workshops, including a craft day for kids, which was a really great event. Some of our other fosters accomplishments is our foster program. So last year we had 548 foster animals. When prior, we actually in 2022 had 267. So we doubled the amount of animals that were into foster, as well as the number of active foster homes. So we went from 77 to 129 active foster homes, with the majority of our foster animals being cats. Just as an FYI, it's the beginning of busy season for us when it comes to cats. And so soon, in a couple of months, we will be inundated with underage and neonate kittens, as well as pregnant moms. And so that is where our foster homes really come in, is during the spring and summer months. We do have 81 dogs that went to foster, but we are always in need of dog fosters. That is one of our most urgent areas, is making sure that, especially our lodge dogs that have perhaps some medical issues or need a little break before they can be put up for adopted, recovering from surgery. That is always one of the areas that we need most. We also had a really great year for transfers. So we increased the number of animals that we transferred to other shelters and rescues, including Seattle Humane, is an example of one of our rescue partners. We went up over 77% over 2022. So we had over 400 animals that were transferred to other rescue partners. And this is really great because as a municipal agency, when it's a private nonprofit, a lot of times they can stop animals coming in or select the animals coming in. We take in everything, right? And so sometimes there's no way to stem that flow. So our partner agencies are really important to help keep animals moving through so that we're not euthanizing for time or space. We also, with our community CAP program, as I had brought to the council before to talk about our community CAP program, we really increased our focus, and we went from 2022, which was our pilot year of trap, neutering, vaccinating, and returning cats. We had 16. Then in 2023, we had 146. So we're gradually increasing those numbers. And again, community CAP program is a great way to make sure that cats are being kept in place in the neighborhoods where they're being cared for, but then also being maintained because they are spay and neutered and vaccinated, so they're healthy. They're not going to continue to reproduce, and then they'll also keep the pests down in that area, and it becomes a mutually beneficial relationship. We also moved to 24/7 on-call after hours for our law enforcement agencies last year. So we have an officer on call 24/7. So if a member of law enforcement calls, that is considered an agency assist, and we go out and assist them. We also go out on other emergencies, such as an animal that's hit by car, injury to a person by an animal. So an example would be a dog biting a human, would be a call that we would go out on after hours. Part of why I bring this up, and then in part of this slide, is the last 2 years we've actually given what we call a field rebate to the jurisdictions because we have not been able to be fully staffed for the last couple of years, including offering this service. So in 2023, we did an overall rebate of $185,000, and the city of Lacey saw just under $38,000 of that rebate. It was distributed per capita. And then in this current year's budget, there was also a rebate of $260,000. And City of Lacey saw just under $58,000 as part of their assessment rebate. This year, we are completely fully staffed. So it is not looking like that there will be a rebate moving into 2025. We also changed our field service officer hiring process. So because we're not specially commissioned anymore, and that was due to SB 5051 and 5051 in 2021. There we go. Which changed what the requirements were to hold special commissions. And so since we are no longer specially commissioned, we were able to change our hiring practice so it wasn't so rigid, and we could actually be a little bit more open to some applications for those field service officers, which are now filled. We also implemented with TCOM a transfer button, because prior we noticed that there was a gap in services where people were calling 911 or TCOM to report an animal call. And the prior SOP for TCOM was to tell the caller to hang up and call us. That created a gap because some people in their frustration were not necessarily calling us or following up. So once we met with TCOM, the new processes they've actually implemented were part of their transfer system now. So while we cannot be dispatched by TCOM, they can transfer a caller over to our system to take that complaint. Programs and services. So some of our programs, for example, is our volunteer program. And last year we had 249 volunteers, which equivalated to over 7,000 hours, which is 3.6 FTEs for us. So they're a huge value. They participate in every point of operations at our facility. They do laundry, they help clean, feed, walk, care for the animals. They do database entry, they do events. They're a part of every facet. We also distributed between 700 and 900 low-cost spay neuter vouchers is what happens usually per year. We participate with 2 other organizations locally, the Spay Neuter Assistance Program, as well as Thurston County Humane Society, and we're the administrator of those grant funds. So we hand out vouchers at the first of every month to people who qualify for that, and those vouchers can get them their animals spay neutered at a lower cost at the local veterinary clinics. We also have Roof Over Rover, which is usually utilized by my field officers when they get a welfare complaint. They go out, a dog has no shelter. Turns out it's because somebody perhaps doesn't have the funding to buy that. So we have extra dog houses that we do hand out to solve the problem, because we are an education and engagement first agency, which means we try to solve the problem the first time out. And if giving a dog house means we don't go back out again, we're going to provide that. We also have multiple reunification programs. So we post all of the animals coming into our facility on our website. We also have 24/7 lost and found reporting that gets posted to social media. And so all those lost and found reports are on social media to be networked by some really fantastic lost and found groups who are really good at networking and finding animals and getting them back home. We also provide resources for owners who are looking to surrender their dogs. So it's not, it's a very holistic approach where we engage with the owners. We ask why they're looking to surrender their animal, give them options to rehome. So we have 2 websites that they can utilize that will help them rehome the animal. We also give them links and sources for veterinarians, trainers, different things like that. And since we've moved to this more holistic approach where we're actually engaging and having conversations, we went from a 41% of our overall intake being owner surrenders to 24%. So last year, we had an increase of 20% of shelter intake of animals over 2022. So we had over 3,000 animals come into the shelter last year. You can see the breakdown with stray being our largest, and then this would be owner surrender. And then over here would be intakes that would be considered miscellaneous. Most of the time, those are usually through the field department, being picked up or case related. This is the breakdown of the types of animals that we're seeing. So the majority of animals that come into the shelter are cats, followed by dogs. We do have sections for other, which is usually our pocket pets, reptiles, and alternative pets that are not dogs and cats. And then we do have a small portion of wildlife. And although we don't service wildlife, what really we're seeing is orphaned possums or orphaned raccoon babies that we move to rehabilitation centers is the majority. We also handle bats for rabies exposures for the health department. We had a really great year. Our positive outcomes increased by 35% overall. So as you can see, our adoptions are up again over last year, as well as our transfers. And then our return to owner was pretty stagnant, and that's because we're making sure that the animals that we're getting are the ones that couldn't be reunified in the public, in the community.
Sarah, you can move that bar up top too. So
Thank you.
Are you finding a lot of your adoptions are from within the county or people coming from all over?
The majority is within the county, but we do have people driving from all over the state, depending on what the animal is. When we had our large scale hoarding case last year of 157 cats, we had people, when those cats went up for adoption, coming from all over. We had people coming from Oregon and across the state to adopt the cats once they were available for adoption. Our field response is also up across the board. So we had 11% increase in overall calls. And as you can see, as it correlates with per capita and population, Thurston County is the largest amount of our calls at about 40%, 46% of total overall field calls for us. Olympia saw Tumwater had the largest increase in the cities, with Olympia following, and Lacey just had a slight increase at 4.8% in overall field calls. Field calls for us can be anything from a simple barking complaint all the way up to cruelty and neglect. When it becomes cruelty and neglect and it is a criminal, becomes a criminal citation, that is when we get our local law enforcement agencies involved to partner with.
Does this increase like coincide with what you guys did with TCOM?
Yeah. We did have some necessary improvements, both last year and then at the beginning of this year. So in 2023, we had a major sewer repair where half the floor was torn up to replace the plumbing. The building's old, it's cast iron pipes, it's expected with the amount of chemicals as well as other items that are going down the drains with animals, that's gonna be caustic to the system. We also had to do a major kennel repair in our adoption area. Those kennels were falling apart. They had been there again since the building was built as the animal shelter. So they were 26 years old, falling apart. We did have to replace those as well. And I bring that up because there are a great number of repairs coming to this building, being that it was built in the 70s. We retrofitted it in 96. And that brings us to what you as the council are already aware from the capital facilities plan that the city of Lacey did. The key findings of our building, which our condition is very, very low. It's not being utilized how it can be because we're too big for the building now with our operations. And it's old and there's no amount of TLC that can fix it at this point. It's 8,000 square feet and it sits on 5 acres. However, only 2.5 are usable because we are surrounded with them. Yeah. And so we did contract with Animal Arts. This is an architecture company that specializes in veterinary clinics and animal shelters to do a space needs analysis. And what they are looking at is what it would look like what the cost would look like to construct a new shelter. And they are able to determine with our data, the size of shelter that we would need, even projecting as far as 2045. So they gather data, they conduct workshops, they look at the services that we provide or are planning to provide in the future, and they plan for that within the building. Potential sites that we are looking at this, obviously in Thurston County. But we are also looking at factors like, is the site owned by a current partner? The parcel size, we need at least 2 acres, but really 3 to 4 is ideal. Proximity to the I-5, proximity to Lacey, since Lacey is our fiduciary custodian. We are trying to look at properties that are within 15 minutes of city limits. Proximity to population centers is also really important when looking at the county. And surrounding parcel noise. We don't want to be bad neighbors. So we don't want to move into a residential area and be a bad neighbor with the noise that an animal shelter brings, as well as current development and if there's any known intentions for development on the property. So there are some advantages and disadvantages to being closer to the city or being outside of the city. Advantages being near population centers, there's transit, there's accessibility to the majority of our population of Thurston County, access to I-5, supplies, all of that. However, some of the downsides to that is we may pay a higher amount for a parcel. We may not be able to find the size that we're looking for, and zoning could get tricky since it is with animals. With that though, there is some disadvantages to us moving outside of the population centers. So again, we wouldn't be as close to the majority of the population that we service. The amount of driving for deliveries and other services provided would be an additional cost to operations to drive to those population centers. And while zoning and or the parcels itself might be a little cheaper, it may not be the best fit for us in our community. So when you break it out, we actually have data to demonstrate where the majority of our calls come from. And this is what's also helping us to determine where our shelter should be located because we want to be in the epicenter of the majority of our calls. So breaking this out, this is again looking at an interesting way to look at it is this is 15 minutes outside of Lacey city limits. Versus if we were moved to a different part of the county, again, looking at that 15-minute allotment. So this would kind of be an example of the same drive range. But then when you overlay with the population that we serve, really it is beneficial to us to stay within this green area than it is to move outside of it if you look at population as well as statistics of zip codes. And finally, because we have been talking about a building and I have been talking about the condition of the building, I would invite and encourage Lacey City Council to come take a tour of the facility and actually see the operations and the general condition of the building. City of Olympia took us up on our invitation and they came out on it was a great tour. They asked a lot of really great questions. And I think it would be a good experience to see what the conditions that we operate in. They're not ideal. We don't meet standards of care that is outlined by the shelter veterinarians. And so I think it is important for us in continuing services with the community to make sure that we're looking at what that looks like for the future. And finally, questions.
Any questions?
I have 2 questions. So in the military, we call summer PCS season. So I was wondering, we have a large military community here. Do we see a lot of rehoming requests specifically from military or surrenders during those months? Because people leave and I know a lot of people who've had to turn in their pets or find another home for them.
We don't necessarily see peaks. We do provide resources to people who ask, and there's also dogs on deployment, which will help foster animals as well for folks that are being deployed, but we have not necessarily seen a correlation of increased intake with that.
And then the other question I had was, obviously we know the building has its struggles, but outside of that, what are some of the bigger struggles for either the staff or the community when it comes to joint animal services?
Our overall struggles.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is it
so
all building?
It's very positive, I would say it was positive, like,
It's-
presentation, like, but I know there's gotta be.
the
Sounds like
building
it.
itself is 100% a huge limitation for us. And the second I would say is staffing. We are very minimally staffed. We are to the point that it doesn't necessarily hurt us for somebody to call out, but it still is a burden when we're down one person even taking PTO or if somebody is out sick. And so that I would say is our second barrier to providing the best services that we could be providing.
Yeah, it seems like your numbers are up and in an upward trend. However, your space needs may not accommodate your future growth.
Correct.
So, obviously, we've already got some data here, of looking at where is a possibly good location. What's the next step in this? I mean, it's still in the process of trying to identify the location or, once we do identify the location, then what's the next step in this process?
Shannon, would you like to take that one?
Sure,
for me?
absolutely. So we're still working through our space needs assessment and we're working with Animal Arts, like Sarah mentioned. And so that is a multi-tiered approach. And so right now, we've gone through the first two phases, which like Sarah mentioned, is collecting the data and doing some data projections and then taking a look at what is available across the community that would meet the needs as identified by Sarah. And so that's where we're at right now. And so we're gonna be entering into kind of the future of saying, hey, we've identified a few parcels and exploring those and then continuing to work on the next couple of phases of what schematics look for the actual building itself.
And then what do we do about the large animal issue? I mean, that seems like it's an ongoing issue. Our current location, we can't have large animals. Are we gonna try to focus on a location where we can accept large animals? Or how much is that gonna play into?
I think it's important to note right now, and I'll let Sarah actually, do you want to take this first and I can add on?
Sure, I was gonna say the caveat to that is the large animal is specifically a county problem. And the county does need to come up with a solution to handle that, whether it's contracting with us in a different fashion, because our scope does not include livestock.
Sure.
And so part of that could be a part of the building. We're not going to say no necessarily at this point, but until the county can determine how they're going to meet that gap in their service, that is not being accounted for as far as our projections.
Because that's like a pretty big, I totally understand that. It feels like we need to come to a consensus on that before we move forward with an actual location. Because if the county says that if they believe their best path forward is to contract with you, then we would need to look at a property that can handle that. If they decide to go in a different direction, then that changes our calculus quite a bit as well. So at what point do we need an answer from the county on which way they're gonna go forward on this?
I think there's a couple of things to note on that particular topic is, number one, when we look at the interlocal agreement, that would also require us to go back and have conversations with all of the jurisdictions on what is in the scope of services for joint animal services. As Sarah's already identified, currently livestock is not something that is contemplated, and that would require a lot of research and analysis to really understand kind of what the cost for services would be in addition to what type of facility that would host, and that could potentially have impacts across all four jurisdictions. And so I think your question is a good one, Mr. Mayor, of, hey, the county needs to determine what they're going to be doing with livestock, but we would also have to determine on a joint animal services if that's even something that we should be taking a look at pursuing pending what the service and risks and liabilities would be associated with that.
Because the worry is, in my mind, is that the county is gonna start diverting funds to handle that issue. And where are they gonna, they might take it from these dollars as well. And so if we could solve both issues under one piece of property, it seems that would make the most sense for the county and for the long term. I understand a new MOU would need to be looked at and everything else, but I mean, I think hopefully at some point, either the JASCOM, the county needs to figure out which direction they're gonna go here on this, because we don't want to do after the fact to say, oh, if we, we want JazzCon to handle this, but now we've picked a property that's is not compatible. Cause I know this is like, we have to figure this out as soon as possible.
Yeah, service levels are something that did come up in last night's meeting, and that will be addressed at a future county meeting.
Okay.
I do think it's important to make a distinction and note too that the service levels that we're talking about too are just our current animal services for domestic animals. And like Sarah mentioned, when we're talking about livestock, it is a kind of distinct
Sure.
item that is really specific to Thurston County and not necessarily the rest of the jurisdictions.
Questions, I can't remember if you guys own the building or lease.
We own the building.
Yeah, that's
and
what
the
I figured, so you have an, something you could sell and help cover some of the costs.
Yeah.
But I was thinking along the lines of, livestock or just another partnership, maybe Department of Fish and Wildlife might have needs too, that they could team up the county and you as well, because sometimes we get spring bear in the city, and they're sending an agent coming down from what is it, Port Orchard. It takes them 2 hours plus, and it winds up with a bear or the wildlife having to be put down for safety reasons or whatever. So that it might be an avenue of a partnership where livestock can come into play, and maybe they have a need or area that can suit as well. So.
Okay, is there any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
So next up on our agenda is the budget amendment briefing for Prop 1 and our financial strategy.
Good evening, council. Share screen real quick. Right, I'm very grateful to be here to present this out of cycle budget amendment to you. We certainly have to thank the voters of Thurston County for this funding. Certainly acknowledgement of the challenge we have in law enforcement and our ability to pay for one of the most important services we provide. Also want to thank Thurston County for their leadership in bringing this to the ballot. So we've had some discussion about this already, so I don't believe this will be new information for the council by any means. But I will provide some background information for the council, for the audience, in terms of really how we got here. So in terms of background, again, this was a proposition that was put on the ballot back in November of last year. So the voters did approve the 0.2% sales tax increase. That sales tax became effective on April 1st of this year. So we're 9 days into the new sales tax. The way the sales tax is distributed, it is collected by the state. It is distributed on a 60-40 basis. 60% goes to the county, 40% goes to the cities on a per capita basis. In terms of Lacey's estimate for annual distributions is just over $2.1 million. So this was a calculation the county provided to us as they were going to the ballot. I do want to remind the council that back in October, on the same night that you passed the resolution supporting the ballot issue, you also passed a resolution that expressed some of the intent of how Lacey would use the funds. The council identified a need for additional law enforcement personnel, permanent funding for the 5 succession planning positions, support for social and support services, as well as maintenance for the new police station. You can see just a little screenshot there of the resolution itself. So in terms of those law enforcement enhancements, based on that resolution, staff met and identified basically the areas that this would cover. I know this is a long list, and you can see that we identified more money than we expect to come in. That's basically the basis of all government accounting in my experience of 30 years of dealing with budgeting, so no surprise. But you can see there at the top, we have just over $1 million for the succession planning positions. I will note that prior estimates for those positions were $750,000. You might remember you have a committed reserve that provides $750 per year for that for a couple of years. We have 2 lieutenants, a sergeant, and 2 officers in there. So with all the changes to labor contracts, as well as the final market analysis on the lieutenant positions, we ended up a little bit short in our projections. So that is the pretty much the actual number on those positions. The next 2 items are the social and support services items. You have the rapid response team at just under 239,000. The mobile outreach team, which is a contract with Thurston Mason Health, is a annual contract for about 214,000. The next 2 line items are really rough estimates on what we think the maintenance operation will be on the police station as well as the training center. Of course, at the time council was contemplating this back in October, we didn't know we'd be able to afford the training center. So that is the one new item on the list. So about $500,000 a year in terms of that rough estimate to maintain those 2 facilities. Now to the good stuff. We think we could fund 4 new police positions at just under $625,000 per year. And then there's just a series of costs that go along with basically supporting those positions. So 4 new police cars, 4 new laptops, as well as just the outfitting, uniforms, supplies, training that go with each officer. So again, the identified cost based on that resolution was just over $2.8 million. So I want to talk about 2025 and beyond first. I tried my best to take the planner out of the city manager. Haven't been successful, so instead there's a little bit of planning happening in finance. So Rick and I had an interesting conversation about how to present this first, and well, he won obviously because he's the boss, but it also makes sense in terms of looking long term, because 2024 is really going to be a transition year in terms of this tax partial year, as well as implementing the new positions and expenditures. So again, think 2025 and beyond. These are the areas, and shaded out there is that we have other ideas for, or maybe we don't have anything identified. But we are suggesting that we do fund the 5 succession planning positions, funding for the mobile outreach team, the 4 officers, and the accompanying costs with the police cars, computers, and just ongoing training, uniforms. The rapid response team, we hope to find other funding. I think there is some hope that this will be a service that will diminish over time, but for the time being, it's a very much needed service. We do have committed reserves identified to provide the funding for this service for the next 2 years. So we do have some time to think and plan on how to find permanent funding for that if need be. In terms of the operation of the police station and the training center, we do hope to find regional partners for the training center. So we hope that by time that facility is up and running, that we have partnerships in place that will help offset the cost to maintain and operate that facility. And then the police station itself, very similar to the rapid response team. The good news is we have, about 18 months or so to try to find that funding. So again, long term, we'd like to fund the 9 positions, as well as the mobile outreach team and the accompanying costs to go with those positions. So long term, just under that $2.1 million projection. So let's talk about 2024 and the transition year and the budget amendment that we hope council will consider here in a couple weeks. We do have, as I said, we have $750,000 for the succession planning positions. So for 2024, we're suggesting the council amend the budget for just under $169,000. That is equal to what's not covered by the reserves, as well as 7/12 of the annual salaries for those positions. The 4 positions, of course, and again, it's at that 7/12 ratio. And then for the remainder of the year in terms of capital investment, so we don't have 4 police cars, we don't have 4 computers for those new positions, so we'd like, especially for the police cars, to build up a reserve to order those police cars in 2025. So the state contracts have closed already for 2024, so we would like to be ready come January 1st, 2025 to order those new police cars so we could put these officers onto the road. So in terms of, what I think, revenues versus expenditures in 2024. So your amendment that you'll consider will have 2/3 of the year of sales tax, so from April to the end of the year. That's equal to about $1.4 million in sales tax for this year. As you can see, for the expenditures, it's just under $1.1 million in total expenditures being proposed to you. The difference is about $350,000. That $350,000 will almost fund the 2-month operating reserve that we have as a requirement in the city council policy for reserve. So the policy is we'd like to have 2 months of operating expenditures in reserve for cash flow purposes. So in terms of that $2.1 million long-term annual budget, 2 months reserve is about $354,000.
So are you saying that going forward, this will be a separately budgeted item? It's not just gonna automatically roll into budget?
For the reserve?
Yeah, for the
No,
reserves.
we just need to set that one time.
Right,
So the savings between the 1.4 million in 2024 projected revenues and this 1.1 million will fund that reserve, and it will just hold that in place for fluctuations in sales tax, or if there's some reason that we think sales tax may not come in, we'll have enough reserves to
got it.
fund all these positions for 2 months.
Okay,
One time.
so we're just increasing our existing reserve by that much.
Correct. Right now, there's 0 reserves, so.
Well, for this additional,
Yeah,
right?
right.
But we have a reserve set up in our police department for everything that we're doing here. We're just adding on to that reserve.
Well, this is going to be, well, I have another slide. We're suggesting that we set up a separate fund.
Okay, that was my question.
So, yeah.
Okay,
So, yeah, well, actually, it's 0 at this point. Yeah, we'll fund it.
nope, very next one. Okay.
Okay, so in terms of next steps, we would like to bring the official amendment ordinance before you on May 7th. As part of that amendment, we would like to have the council adopt the 2024 projection for sales tax, authorize the 4 new positions, as well as a series of expenditures, the 5 succession planning positions, funding for the mobile outreach team, as well as building up that reserve for the capital purchases for the police cars and the other associated costs that go along with those new positions. The ordinance will also establish a brand new fund. So we, I believe in the resolution, we talked about a criminal justice fund, which we already have, but we think it would be cleanest to have a second criminal justice fund to make sure that these special revenues are accounted for, as well as make it a true operating fund, which will bring in these 9 positions. So again, a new fund, new reserve.
So every year during our budget, there'll be officers that are funded out of this and officers are funded out of normal.
Correct.
Okay, correct.
The amendment will also include transfers from the current expense fund, so where our police expenditures are now, so to move those committed reserves for succession planning, as well as the mobile outreach team, we would like to move those reserves, transfer those reserves into this new fund to help fund those expenditures. And then my last bullet is really just to give us a little bit of time to make sure that all those numbers are correct. I feel very confident, so I don't want you to think that we're not confident with the numbers we just presented, but really want to take a double check of the actual cash flow in terms of this new tax, when expenditures are actually going to start, just to make sure that since it will be a separate fund, we cannot run into negative cash. So we just want to make sure that timing is is good. And so there is the potential we may include some operating transfers or like maybe interfund loan, just to make sure we maintain that positive cash flow. So we'll take the next couple of weeks and make sure we get that right before we present that to you on May 7th. So that is our plan. Love to take any direction if you have different thoughts, and of course answer any questions you might have.
Point of clarification, though, I think would be an awesome recruiting tool. The 4 new cars don't go to the 4 new officers, right? It goes to the general pool. Okay, because that could be a recruiting tool. Come to Lacey, get a new car.
Well, Lacey is our recruiting tool.
Yeah, it is. I agree with you.
Might be a problem with our retention.
So, I mean, obviously, the way the math plays out, here's our needs. Here's how much revenue comes in. However we want to play it, right? It's either we gotta find revenue for it one way or the other. And so at this point, I feel comfortable leaving it up to you guys to figure out what's the best way to figure out if you want to use these dollars specifically for this, or if you want to find outside revenue. I do say that from my standpoint, the mobile outreach team is critically important, needs to be funded. And so using these dedicated funds for that is good. I also think the rapid response team is very important. It's something that our community members are relying upon. It's a direct, it's really important. And so as long as we can find other funding to support that, I'm okay with it, but as long as that it's still a priority to be funded.
It is. One of those things we're looking through the hierarchy and come down to mobile outreach team versus the rapid response team is mobile outreach team is that direct service to aid our officers on the, on the ground and interacting with folks in the community. The rapid response team is also on call and helps. And it's funded with reserves for the next 2 years. We have time to figure out how to absorb or find other ways to fund that program out of public works operations. So it is a priority. It's just between the two, the more critical need for supporting our officers in the community was the mobile outreach team.
Can you go over the scope of the rapid response team just real briefly?
The
The rapid response team is a 2-person team with a pickup truck that goes out and does graffiti abatement, picks up abandoned campsites on public property, picks up derelict and abandoned shopping carts, debris, all that nonsense.
So that was this is what gets me to my point, to maybe add on to what Mayor Riley was saying was, we asked for this money from the public. And I think a big reason why it was approved was because of how bad things had gotten, over the course of COVID. And so to not say with this money this new money that we asked from you to have to put that we're gonna have a permanent fund for these things that we don't want to ever happen again is at least a little concern for me, because I think, these are partially the reasons why we got this funding approved in the first place.
And it is a direct support to law enforcement activities that we've talked about, that the council passed a resolution that these funds were to go to.
And I think those positions save a lot of money on the back end.
They can, and again, with the reserves we have in place, we still have time to figure out how to continue that service. And we thought it was also important to get those 4 officers as well as that direct mobile outreach team support secured. And then again, as we monitor this revenue source over time, there may be some growth there or some savings there that we then go back and go to that list and figure out, okay, how do we continue to build and fund what's on that list?
So when you can start the hire for new police officers?
Well, once the idea or the plan would be, once council would pass the budget amendment ordinance, then we can look in starting the recruitment process, because it will take some time, and be ready to have people start the process or on board as the funds become available July 1st.
Because as we know, it seems like it takes a long time to recruit and everything else. So if there may be, we might not get the 4 officers on until next year. I mean, who knows? Hopefully, no, okay.
If we hire entry-level officers waiting until July 1st, you won't see them until the end of Q1 at the earliest. If they're lateral officers, you may see them before the end of the year.
Okay.
We have the need to hire them anyways. Right?
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
I have a question. So out of the 40% going to cities, what percentage is that of Lacey's as compared to Olympia, Young?
That's our cost. That's
Per
our
capita, I think it's.
per capita.
Okay.
And so obviously
That's good.
Troy, you've done the calculations based on what our budget, sales tax budget revenue. This is what the net, because you said this was the county's number,
It is,
but does this county look at your sales tax revenue?
there
Forecast?
may be, 150,000 difference. I looked actually at the PFD revenues,
Okay,
which
yeah.
is like countywide.
Sure, but that difference is in favor of us. We're great.
Well, yeah, I mean, we do take a conservative approach.
Yeah. So
But
this
yeah,
could be a 150,000 low.
right, and we'll take a hard look at that for 25. So yeah, we could find that funding for the rapid response team.
Mhm.
Also point on the rapid response team, there's a general benefit there too, not just
There is.
law enforcement,
Yep.
so we should look at, more generalized revenue sources for that, because
That's true.
there's definitely a benefit outside of law enforcement. with that
Absolutely.
team.
Absolutely.
Speaking of things we're gonna find other money for, do you have ideas for where we're gonna find the maintenance and operations funding for the police station?
Well, first I'll start with the training center. We talked about that in the past of the regional partnerships and use of the facility and rental of the facility. That's one way to look at the training center.
Interagency agreement funding?
Correct. And then with the training or the police station, that is something that we need to build in and look at how do we fund the maintenance of that. We got 2 years. It doesn't come online until 2026. But we also need to do that and look at our maintenance ratios for all of our facilities too, because we're starting to
Say it
find
should be
that.
part of the facilities plan, right?
Correct.
And it's gonna be relatively cheap to maintain at the beginning.
Right.
Because it's gonna be
Be
nice
a
and
rent-
new, and it will get more expensive as it ages.
That's right. That's why we looked at that number as as Troy always says, it's a conservative number, but it's not the startup maintenance, but it's that build up into maintenance that we need to be conscious of as an organization.
To the point that Nick made about the MOT and rapid, response teams, I think we can make a statement as a council that these important services will be funded just out of a different pot of money and continue to show that commitment to the community.
Absolutely.
It's a communication issue more than a budgetary issue in my mind.
So, when we initially started talking about these dollars, we were looking at I think we were looking at leaning on the reserves to the tune of about $750 a year, somewhere in that ballpark. And one of the things that at least I was concerned about was, stopping that bleeding. Once, these dollars comes in, and from this plan, it looks like we're still going to be leaning on those same reserves to the tune of at least 240, possibly 452. Is that about right?
Yes, and again, though, you had the $750,000 in reserves for the 5 succession planning positions, the 240 for rapid response team and the 220 for MOTS. So that's almost $1 million reserve that we're cutting down to 240 going forward, with a 2-year window to try to find other funding sources.
Okay. Plan on lobbying the state for training monies, right? I mean, I think we can all agree that, better trained officers and stuff like that.
And early conversations have been very positive with our partners in the state of Washington and everything. And so we were hoping to get some dollars this year, but I think we're very well positioned for future dollars for the training facility for sure. Okay, anything else? Well, then you have a couple weeks to come back with actual budget amendment and we'll discuss it then.
See you in May.
Hey, real quick, follow up on Councilmember Stedman's question. Lacey's population percentage of the county is 37.28%.
Oh, there you go. Okay,
I'm hoping it was 40.
thank you. Next up on our agenda is our city council purchasing card training.
All right, I will introduce the topic. First, I'll introduce Chelsea Yarwood. She's our accounting manager. I think you've seen her in the audience from time to time, but she's one of the driving forces behind the success of the finance department. So appreciate her being here tonight. We We're at a kind of transition point with our credit card program, so we are going to be switching providers. We're also going to be expanding the program throughout the organization, so it's a really nice timing piece to come before the council. Part of our procedures that we developed in the finance department is a required training, which is why we're before you here tonight. You do have in your packet a copy of the policy, the credit card instructions, as well as a credit card agreement. So those are more just for reference for you tonight. You know, as Chelsea goes through the presentation, do want to point out that this is a training that's more geared towards the regular employee that's making purchases on behalf of the organization. You know, at this point, the council's using credit cards a little bit differently in terms of mainly for travel. I think there's a few subscriptions and registrations that go on your credit cards, but at this point, we don't foresee any changes in the way the credit cards are used by the council or the way they're administered. At this point, it's probably good to recognize Nicole Williams for all of her help that she provides to the council in terms of reconciling statements and making sure you all have your receipts and we get everything documented. So certainly appreciate Nicole and all her work. I did hand out credit card applications to you before the meeting. It's really just for your consideration. We are going to require these in order for you to get new credit cards, so I'll say that. But tonight, if you so choose, we can kind of administratively take care of these applications. I believe historically, the mayor has signed on behalf or approving council, and I think the deputy mayor signs for the mayor. So
Correct.
while we all have you all here, we thought maybe we'd be efficient and get that done if you so choose. So they're there for your consideration. The agreement that you do have in your packet, that is for when you actually get issued your card. So we don't need action on that tonight, but again, really they're just for your reference going forward. So with that, I'll hand it over to Chelsea.
Thank you. And thank you to all of you for letting me present tonight for the first time. And here we go. So the first slide is really roles and responsibilities. The finance department will administer the program, which includes maintaining policies and procedures and ordering or canceling cards as needed. Directors are going to be responsible for authorizing eligible employees to participate, and they can also appoint a designee to help manage the program and review reconciliations and things like that. Card users will be responsible for maintaining their cards. So that includes obtaining itemized receipts for each of the purchases. You're going to hear about this a lot. It's going to be a common theme through this presentation. Reconciling purchases monthly at a minimum and reporting fraud and lost or stolen cards promptly. So some policy information. Cards may only be used by the individual whose name is on the card. We have set the transaction limit to $2,500. Troy and Christy in the finance department can override this limit for special circumstances as with a business need. And you can see from the chart that's on the slide that the average transaction amount from the last 5 years is well under that $2,500. Purchases will not be split up to make it so that you are below the limit, but purchasing multiple times. And US Bank, who's our vendor, will actually block those attempts. So directors may establish lower limits for employees if they choose to. Card users must still comply with purchasing policies and procedures. An example being, seeking the most economical item available.
Lowest bidder.
Yes, essentially. Itemized receipts must be obtained from vendors for each purchase. And just to clarify, that means that each item, including any applicable tax and shipping, should be listed on the receipt. Restrictions. The following transaction types are strictly prohibited. Cash advances or cash refunds, personal or non-city use of any kind, items purchased for departmental inventories, capital expenditures, minor equipment over $1,000, computer, hardware, software, or peripherals. That's going to be limited to our IS staff only. Telecommunications equipment, software services, IS staff, and then finance as well only. Services considered public work. Goods or services currently on city contracts. And that's a pretty good list, but the policy has more details, so we encourage everybody to get really familiar with the policy. So And feel free to ask questions if you have any along the way. So the next slide is misuse of purchasing cards. This is kind of the heavy slide. If for any reason disallowed purchases are made, the city may take the following actions against the cardholder. And that's immediate repayment of the charge, including applicable taxes and fees, permanent revocation of purchasing card privileges, disciplinary action by the supervisor, and adjustment of wages for repayment of discrepancies. There's actually RCW that allows for this. It's referenced on the slide. And then kind of lastly, notification to the state auditor's office to investigate the matter. Sometimes criminal charges could follow, especially if it's found to be intentional. Actually purchasing with the card. This slide's specific to kind of in-person purchases. So all purchases require an itemized receipt. Purchases will be considered personal in nature and disallowed if the receipt does not include a description of all the items. Typically, merchants are going to require sales receipts to be signed. So before you do that, make sure there's sales tax included on the receipt and the merchant name is on there. Make sure the card is returned to you and keep it safe when it's not in use.
So, you want questions at the end or?
Either way.
Okay, so like, let's say for example, per diem items.
Mhm.
Do we just continue what we've been doing?
Yes, yep,
Okay.
per diem will stay the same. The next slide is essentially remote purchases, so over the phone or online. Again, you're gonna need to specify that you need an itemized receipt. This can be paper or digital, as long as the receipt breaks out the cost of the good, the shipping and delivery, the taxes. And again, purchases will be considered personal in nature and disallowed if it's not itemized. When the order arrives, verify all items were received and retain the receipts and packing slips for the monthly reconciliation. If items were not received but charges actually appeared, definitely reach out to the seller and let us know of any discrepancies. A merchant cannot charge until the order has shipped, so the only delay should be due to that shipping time. For subscription payments, attach the subscription form with your receipt. And for class or training registration payments, attach a copy of the registration with your receipt, as well as if travel is involved, a copy of the approved travel form.
So right now, that is all usually handled by Nicole. So will anything change going forward?
I don't believe for you guys, but I'm kind of looking to Rick.
The goal is still support council and do that process, but.
And the other question is, do you prefer that council uses this credit card going forward? Or is there, can we still go for reimbursement? Use our regular credit card?
Yeah, so there's basically two choices, like in the form of travel, let's say, there's gonna be two options. You can use the city credit card and you can use that because you will have it on hand if you need to take it to a hotel with you, that kind of thing. So you could use your city credit card, or you can just pay everything up front and then we would reimburse you upon return of the trip. Yeah.
It's the main difference is if you use your own personal credit card for reimbursement, your reimbursement will lag until it's complete of travel. So you maybe a couple of months before you get reimbursed.
Hopefully it doesn't take that long, but yeah. Hopefully it won't take that long to get reimbursed.
Well, it depends on when you make your reservations and those.
Sure.
Travel, actual travel.
Next few slides are really just administrative related. So you're gonna receive the card and there's gonna be a letter for how to activate it. There's a website you're gonna go to, which is pictured on the screen, and the link that you're gonna wanna click. There's gonna be a sticker on it saying that you can call and activate it, but we cannot use that. Go to the website to do it. That's not how the organization cards work. And then just as a reminder, don't save your account information into browsers, either websites or maybe even apps, on your phone. Definitely enter that information each time you need to use it. So the monthly reconciliation, this is kind of to your question, Mr. Mayor. So this is really more for our employee base with the implementation of individual cards, because they're going to be doing this monthly reconciliation now. So the bank's going to notify the card users via email when the statements are available to pull off the internet. The statement can be viewed and the purchases can be reconciled via that same website that I talked about earlier. And then from there, appropriate account codes can be assigned to each purchase online. Our chart of accounts is gonna be embedded within the US Bank portal for people to choose which account numbers they would like, so that's pretty cool. The card statement, transaction list with account codes, and all the receipts will be submitted to supervisor or the supervisor's designee for approval. And then after approval, it'll be submitted to finance. All reconciliations we're requesting to be to finance within 10 days of the statement being available. There's a very detailed reconciliation guide that the finance team has put together with really nice step-by-step instructions with screenshots and narrative. And so it'll be really helpful for employees when they get to that step for the first couple times. So changes to cardholder information, any updates to information such as name changes must be reported to finance using a maintenance form. Finance will submit any changes to the bank and order new cards if necessary. It's the responsibility of each director to notify finance of the termination or transfer of an employee that had been issued a card. We'll cancel the card if needed. So it's really important that this be done timely so that we can avoid any unauthorized purchases. And also important to note that users that move to a different department actually have to get reauthorized by that new director. They don't just get to transfer their card.
So you know how like sometimes when you use a card and they say, hey, do you want to email the receipt, right? If we go with that option, is there a place that we would email it to expedite any of this or?
I think for you, you would just forward it to Nicole and then she would get it to
Yeah,
us.
have it emailed to yourself and then you forward it to Nicole.
Stick with what we've been doing.
Stick with what we're doing. When I've done that, I've had it either mostly emailed, to your own email and then forward that onto Nicole.
Because it would seem like with, a corporate card or, this type of situation that maybe, the receipts, there would be an expedited process for getting the receipts to where they need to be. If that's not an option yet, then that's not an option yet, but it would seem like that same portal would be used for the general accounting purposes of what this card does.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. And there's actually the ability to upload your receipt into the portal so that it's already right there. But until we get really used to it and comfortable with it, the monthly reconciliation is still gonna happen at the individual level, and then that's gonna end up, with us in finance. And so until the full month can be kind of reconciled all together, a lot of times for our frequent users, there's not a lot of just one-time purchases. So
Again, Nicole's gonna be
Yeah.
reconciling.
for you guys,
Well,
yeah.
look at that, because there's one thing for the reimbursement programs, but we also gotta look at, if there's not a lot of, shouldn't be a lot of activity on council cards, so, but there's gonna have to be a verification. If she goes through that, she's gonna have to work with each one of you and verify it.
Sure.
So you still have that personal accountability.
Okay, fraud, lost, or stolen cards. If you suspect your card has been compromised, definitely reach out to US Bank supervisor and the finance team. The police should be notified in the event of robbery, burglary, etc. You're gonna provide the following information: your name, the last 4 digits of your card, which you will no longer have potentially if it's been lost. So you should be able to find that online. The date reported to the police if that was applicable, and a case number and agency reported to if that was the case. Any purchases made on the day the card was stolen, because we won't dispute those charges if you actually made charges those days. And then the missing card will be canceled and a new card will be issued. So we're gonna make training available to everybody, and we have created an email address, the COL credit card at colac.org, and that's really for questions, comments, and concerns at this point. We're gonna request that the packets be submitted to finance as usual in person.
Questions?
Effective date?
So we are waiting for some a single sign-on access with US Bank. So we're in the testing phase of that right now. So we're hoping really soon. It shouldn't take long to test it. So
So
more to
I
come.
guess this is more of a question for Troy. Why do we go with US Bank? I mean, didn't we have a local bank that we were using before?
State contract and the fact that US Bank has a crosswalk into our financial system, so it's an efficiency piece, so. This is a program geared towards all small purchases, and I think once employees become comfortable, I think this is going to be the preferred method for purchasing, which means volume is going to go up, smaller purchases, higher volume. And we just, from an administrative standpoint, we just need some help and some efficiency. So again, US Bank has a nice crosswalk into our system.
Or is this, it's like, are we in a contract with them for this, or is?
We are, so we use the state contracts, their bids, so US Bank holds the purchasing card contract with the state.
Is there a sunset on it, or like, how long is it?
I'm sure there is, I can't tell you what that is, so the state goes, when they handle these state contracts, they go off RFP periodically, so it might be 5 years, but I'm not exactly sure.
Gotcha.
Okay, any questions?
One that may seem like a silly question, but I just want to make sure I get it right. Where it asks, I am a regular city employee, council members should say no.
We are a regular city employee.
Yeah, but it's yes, you are employees and so,
Okay,
Yep.
interesting, yeah.
You feel regular?
yeah, so in terms of the policy doesn't allow credit cards to be issued to temporary or part-time employees, so that's what that's why that's.
And the only time we obviously would use a credit card is for travel.
Yeah.
And so if you, before the next time we have to travel, if you want city credit card, we need to fill this out and I need to sign it, so. Okay. Anything else?
You need these back tonight?
I can sign it.
Again,
before-
you're ready to.
That's the one the makers people sign. Except for his, which you signed.
You go over again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, last agenda item. Is community economic development activity update.
Hey, well, yeah, Sarah gets settled here. If I don't mind kicking us off a little bit on this presentation tonight, we're excited to be here to present the private development update to the council. But before Sarah gets started, I just want to highlight the fact that everything in here in terms of private development really takes a team effort in CED between our inspectors, our planners, as well as our permit techs at the front counter. And so as we looked at all these great projects that are being developed in the city, it is a full team. And I'm really excited to be a part of that team. They are really, really strong people. In addition to, and not to be forgotten, our public works folks that also do a lot of effort on the infrastructure as well to get these projects to come to fruition. So just want to give that highlight. Sarah is here and I am here, but it really is the community economic development team that brings these projects to fruition. With that, go ahead.
All right, thanks. Before we get started, I'm gonna pass out a map that you guys can reference as we go through the development update. And this update is for 2023. I don't have data in here for 2024. We're too new into the year to have data that's actually meaningful as to what's going on in the development or in terms of development activity for 2024. So everything will be up until January or December 31st, 2023. So we'll go ahead and get started. And we're gonna start with the housing starts. And so these housing starts, they're building permits issued for 2023. And I have the permits, and so the map, just so you are aware, you don't need to worry too much about the map until we start looking at the development projects, which is about 5 slides in. I'll key you in on that when we get to that point. But this first slide is the housing starts, both multifamily and single family and duplex permits. And you'll see for our single family structures in the orange, we're running right along a little bit more than in 2022 for 2023, because we did have a major plat that came in and nearly fully developed in 2023. But our multifamily units, building permit issuance, the total units came down a little bit. And I don't think, I think what this is really showing is that in 2021 and 2022, those were big years for multifamily development, and those in 2023 were under construction. So we had a ton of construction activity, not necessarily new permits issued for multifamily units in 2023.
Next we'll look at new commercial and industrial additions. And we had a lot of commercial and industrial additions as well as new commercial and industrial permits issued in 2023. We'd be looking at for 190 commercial and industrial additions. This includes tenant improvement permits. So we had a lot of activity in Northeast Lacey, the Hogan Bay Town Center. That would include all the TI permits that would have been issued for all the new activity going in at Hogan Bay Town Center. Down at Lacey Corporate Center, we had some new, or Lacey Crossroads, we had some new development. And for both new commercial buildings as well as tenant improvements for Lacey Crossroads. Especially out in Northeast Lacey. We see we're big spike in 2023 for this kind of activity. So our building permit guys were really busy reviewing permits in 2022 and 2023.
You want questions at the end or?
You can ask questions whenever you like.
Okay, so just so I understand, because you guys are thinking about, I'm gonna ask it. So when a developer, puts a building out, and then he is just responsible for the shell, and then the tenant is responsible for the improvement, and then that's a separate permit for
It
that
is.
tenant. So now we're talking about two different
Right.
entities applying for that, for.
For one building, sometimes.
Okay.
Yep.
Could be the same.
Sometimes it could be the same, yeah.
Okay, so it was a simple question. I just want to make sure that I understood that.
Okay. So now we'll look at land use permits. And so this is, land use permits are those permits that developers submit so that they can get approval to actually construct the hotels or the Hogan Bay Town Centers. And in 2023, we had 30 new land use applications submitted, and 30 new land use applications, approved in 2023, and 9 quasi-judicial. Quasi-judicial are those permits that require a public hearing before the land use hearings examiner. Once the city council as well, but now the hearings examiner will be hearing those 9 quasi-judicial permits. 9 is kind of a lot, and I think a lot of those were likely public works lift station projects. We had some wetland development permits that are quasi-judicial, but probably likely conditional use permits for public works improvement projects.
I have one question.
Okay.
Going back to the multi-family units and the single family,
Uh-huh.
those numbers are once occupancy is given.
Those are issued permits.
Okay.
Permits issued, yeah. And then just to look at some of the other things that our building department reviews, we're holding pretty steady on the type of permits that we've issued over the last few years, with the exception of residential remodel permits and sign permits, lots of sign permits. And 7,000, just about 7,500 inspections for our, I think, 4 inspectors that we have on staff at the city, going out and completing building permits, signing off on building permits. 54 pre-application meetings, and pre-application meetings are developers do submit pre-sub applications and come in and meet with planners, the Public Works Department, to get advice, guidance on how to submit their land use application for review to the city. Now I think we're gonna move into land use. And the land use projects we're gonna start with, most of you were here in September for our bus tour. And we're gonna start with a few of the projects that were on the bus tour that when we went out, they were in their pretty early stages of development, and we've seen some tremendous changes, especially out in Northeast Lacey on those projects that we took a look at. Some of the others haven't quite broken ground yet, but I thought I'd give an update into where they were in terms of their building permit submittal and approval process. So the first one we're gonna look at is Lacey Midtown 7th Avenue Apartments. And if you remember, this is a MJR project, 376 residential units in 2 buildings with 18,000 square feet of ground floor commercial space. They have submitted their building permits. They're just now in for review and getting ready, Terry's getting ready to start reviewing those.
And this is where you can start referring to.
Right,
The
sorry,
map
thank
that's
you.
printed out.
Yeah.
So that's basically in the parking lot.
It's the parking lot, yep,
Yes.
it's a reuse of a parking field. So that's a great addition to Lacey Midtown. to achieve kind of that downtown feel we're looking for with
Mhm.
that type of development.
And is this gonna also have a parking garage in each one?
Underneath, yep, it's approved for a parking garage underneath, yep.
Yeah, not really.
Also, a project of MJR development is 629 Woodland, and this is a kitty corner to the park, and it's an old office building. Here you see it in this picture. And they have approval to convert this office building into 50 units of apartments, so studios, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. On the park, a great location, and once the 7th Avenue project gets moving forward, it's great to liven up the space in Lacey Midtown. I don't have it on in the slide deck, but they also own the building MJR own the building immediately behind Huntermer Park, and they have been in talks with they've had pre-subs for improvements to that building immediately behind the park, and would add a restaurant on the ground floor with some outdoor space as well, which is a great project.
Yeah, and where's that at in the process?
They haven't submitted their land use application yet,
Okay.
but they own the properties.
Yeah.
The buildings are vacant, or the one building is vacant at least, and I know that they intend to move forward.
And then where are they at on 629? Are they in?
This land use approval's been issued in November. They have 18 months to submit their building permit applications. In talking with them, this was one of their priority projects because typically when we're talking about office building conversions, it's not really easy to convert them to apartments. This one really lends itself to. So they were excited to move this forward. They felt like it would be an easy project to get underway. A lot of things are kind of on hold for financing, even with the big developers right now. So next I'm gonna move to Bradley Park, and it's a subdivision on 15th Avenue Northeast, immediately across from North Thurston High School, across 6th Avenue from North Thurston High School. And this is what it looked like when we went on the bus tour back in September. And this is what it looks like today. There's 81 single-family homes. There's building permits been issued for each one of those lots. And about 2/3 of the lots are sold. They've got a couple different styles of homes, regular regular front-loaded homes with the garage on the front of the house along the perimeter, and then alley-loaded houses down the center of the project with a green space in behind. The lots in the center, the alley-loaded lots are small. They're like 3,000 square feet with homes about 1,400 to 1,600 square feet. And they are all sold, and their starting price is 480,000 square feet. But when we're talking about,
1,000.
yeah, yeah,
For a 1,400 square. feet.
right?
We keep on saying anything under 15,000 is gonna be that's considered a tiny.
It's like a
home.
cottage home.
It's-
Mhm.
yeah.
It meets our cottage
This
home
is kind of what we
definition.
highlight too, because we had some conversations about, is there a way to encourage more less than 1,500 square foot housing stock out there?
And but they're still getting 480,000
They
for it.
There, and,
Holy smokes.
yep, and the ones on the outside are are a little over 500. They're
Yes.
great
about
little
580.
homes. They are beautiful when you're out there. The contractor has been doing a great job.
Concessions on those, like lowered interest rates, like if they're new construction, so there could be
They're selling.
cost savings passed down to the buyer that you wouldn't get on a.
Because it's new build,
Yeah.
because it's new build, yep.
But
Yes.
this
Could
is,
be inflating the price.
this is D.R. Horton, and this is
Oh, yeah.
the type of development that D.R. Horton does. And
Mhm.
they built a couple here in Lacey, and they're gonna be building some more as well.
Very popular based on how quickly they're selling.
Yes.
Well, yeah, because it's still tough to get a new house in that price range, which is crazy.
And they're probably getting like 2% better rate on that than.
Yeah.
The next is the Modera planned residential development. And this is what it looked like again in September. And this is a mix of single family, well, there's 23 single family homes, and you see the plat back here in the corner. And sorry, my computer went out or blacked out on one second, but I turned to my actual paper. 346 apartment units in 14 buildings, and 16 units or 16 carriage house units within the development. And carriage houses, they're over the garage, they're like little studio apartments. So construction on the buildings now is nearly complete. This is the development. I don't have the nice aerial photography that we got the last time. I apologize for that, but it's nearly built out for the multifamily. The single family is built out and they are all sold out. So none of these homes, one, maybe the model home was in existence 6 months ago when we went out on the bus tour, and now they're built and all sold.
This is the one on 15th that touches that five.
15th, yep,
Yeah.
yep. And these again, they range, they run about 2,000 square feet and $500,000 to $600,000 for those homes. The rents for the multifamily, they range from $1,600 to $2,500 per unit based on the size of the unit. The smallest units are 550 square feet and they're going for $1,600 a month per rent.
It's a garage.
Yeah, yeah.
Small.
And you'll see that in all of the, I looked at all the rents of all the apartments that I'm gonna show you, and it's very similar. The only thing that I would say in doing some of the research on the rents, many of these apartment complexes out, this one, and the others here out in Northeast Lacey, Carlo Apartments. This was 188 units, that was September, and this is current as of March 15th. This isn't leasing yet. But the Tilden Apartments, which are immediately kitty corner to it, are leasing, and complete. 216 units, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, 740 to about 1,200 square feet, rent starting at $1,800 a month. A lot of them, looking at their websites, they do have rent incentives right now to try and get people in. There's 4 to 8 weeks of free rent in some of these places, so.
What number's the Carlo?
Oh, I'm sorry.
5?
Yeah, I think the Carlo Apartments didn't show up on the map. The number is there, it's 5, but
That was the hard,
Yeah,
the one that
yeah,
I think our
yeah,
printer ran
yeah,
out of that ink
yeah.
color.
but 6, it's immediately kitty corner to number 6.
Stop by Tilden this weekend.
Yeah. And what these are really advertising to people, these apartments, is like a luxury lifestyle living. They've got pools, they've got spas, they've got outdoor living spaces, all pets are allowed, they have dog parks, lots of different things to try to entice renters to these units. The next one I wanted to take you to were Campus Springs and Campus Reserve. And if you remember, these are units that were built condo style. And now these as well are nearly complete. I think Campus Reserve has a few minor details to finish up in some of the units. But these are units 1,200 to 1,600 square feet. They're townhouse style condos, priced between $360 and $460. When I looked the other day, there were only 5 units left between both, between both of those.
So I rode that one
Wow.
this past weekend. Stopped by there on a little bicycle ride. And the access on, so it's really just one way in. and
On
one
Campus
way-
Reserve,
Yeah,
probably,
for that. So they punched the road through, but
Mhm.
then they blocked it off.
Oh, back here,
Yeah, so
That's the gate.
that's interesting. I'll have to ask Terry about that and why, I would think they'd want to have that. I would
I thought so
think
too.
they'd want to have that
Yeah.
access point. That's interesting. I don't know that it was supposed to be. a
so are-
access gate, but-
So they've been sold, the people actually living in them?
Yes,
there?
Yeah.
yep, yep,
full.
yep.
Yep. The thing that I think is interesting here is to compare the square footage and the
Mhm.
price points. These are both ownership products, right?
Mhm.
Townhomes or condominium style townhomes to the D.R. Horton projects that are the single family homes that are fee simple. So as you can see, you do get some price reductions when you start to move to condominiums over fee simple type of sale product. So we get about $100,000 off these
Mhm.
units for that change, but you don't own the land when you own these units, which is the difference.
And none of these units are part of the
So they're,
census,
yeah.
so they're. City's gonna.
So how, do you know how much, the average, the maintenance fees on this or the,
Oh, the HOA.
Oh, gosh, I don't.
right?
No.
Cause that's
No,
covering
yeah.
the land and the.
That
Yeah,
that
yeah.
adds up. Usually you have a higher HOA
Yeah.
cost, typically with
Yeah,
an
probably.
attached
Yeah.
structure and a
$300.
condominium structure. But
It depends on how they draft them.
Yeah.
So these ones that were built as condos,
Mhm.
this is the first time in a long time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
is this kind of, does this feel like a little bit of a pilot and maybe this could happen again in the near future, or what's the vibe on this?
So these were built, I think the city kind of forced their hand. These were built as part of the subdivisions of Campus Reserve and Campus Springs, and they were required to set aside an area for multifamily. And Campus Reserve, I think, was 3 acres and Campus Springs was 2 acres. Lennar built these, and Lennar doesn't want to build apartments. And this is, condos are considered a multifamily
Sure.
type of development. So in lieu of building single family homes, which I think they would have preferred to do, they built the condos, but
Have they
that
been
being
happy with
said.
it? Have they been happy with it? I mean, they sold out like that.
I know. That being said, I think a lot of condo development is stalled because of the liability associated for the developer associated with condo development. There was a state law passed last year that is supposed to help
Mhm.
reduce some of that liability. I think it kind of remains to be seen what will happen with that.
And, you know, if I could wager a guess, obviously this is just looking at the market. But I'm seeing condominiums come back into the market when you have this ground related type of unit in a townhome
Mhm.
form of construction versus the more historic version of condominiums, which is your vertical construction. And there's most likely a relationship to liability costs and that type of construction being lower versus the other style of construction. I haven't seen a lot of the vertical type come back to the market.
Well, yeah, I mean, they all have garage door.
And they own the floors above them.
Yeah.
And so there may
Yeah,
be
people
some
stop it.
nuances there. I'm not an attorney. I don't necessarily know, but it's interesting to see it coming back in this particular form.
They all do.
Nope.
They do, in these, they all have limited common areas associated with them, so they have primary use of or outdoor space. Like a very small 300 square foot, maybe backyard, that they have access to in these.
Is it an easement or is it ownership?
It's an easement, so it's a limited common element that
Yep.
they have access
Okay.
to.
Hmm.
Yep.
I can see why this would be popular.
Mhm, for
I
sure.
I don't want to
I know.
mow my yard where I mean, I love the downsides too and something like that. Mhm.
So next, we're gonna go to some commercial projects that we're seeing that we're excited about seeing get off the ground. And I don't have a before picture of this, because it was just a big pile of dirt when we went out there, but this is the Hickory. It's back by, it's on Britton Parkway, the north side of Britton Parkway. It's owned by the Kaufman family.
Oh, yeah.
Behind the Providence Medical Center, adjacent to Britton Plaza. And Orly Orthopedic, they've had plans for a long time to come in. They finally submitted their building permits and gotten design review approval on a 25,000 square foot medical surgery center. So we're really excited about that moving forward, and immediately across the parking lot from Olympia Orthopedic is gonna be the Pacific Cataract and Laser Eye Institute, or Laser Eye, Institute. A laser eye center there. The Kaufmans are building this out as a medical complex. They have a few other pads that they can build here in the future. There's talk about doing some sort of like outdoor food truck market type spot in the northeast corner of the site, but they haven't come in on that at this point yet. But those are 2 good new projects that'll be on our 2024 permits issued list, hopefully. And then as far as Hogan Bay Town Center goes, this was back in September, and let's see, I must not have a good aerial of that now. This is the new site plan though, and they're continuing to build out with new tenants. The latest tenants, Super Chicks, are moving in. Up in this corner, I think that this is an old site plan. I apologize for that. It's gonna be a sit-down restaurant actually called Cooper's Bar and Grill, which is a local place out of Tacoma.
And I can add a little commentary to that. It's right down the street from me. It's my daughter's favorite
Oh,
restaurant. So
nice.
welcome to Lacey.
Love to hear
They're asking for restaurants, right?
Another childcare center, the Learning Experience is gonna go, I think it's taking about 10,000 square feet. And then this pad here, a couple pretty cool things, the Dough Zone, which is a local or regional chain out of Seattle. It's like dumplings. Is gonna come in there. And then Humble Cow is planning on opening taking the small portion of this building for another ice cream shop.
I do like Humble Cow.
I know, it's really exciting because I live out there.
Chicken, fast.
Super Chicks is, yeah, it's a chain. It's a very limited chain. It's chicken sandwiches, chicken and custard is what it is, fried chicken and
Chicken and
ice
custard?
cream. Yeah, chicken and ice cream.
Oh, okay.
I think I jumped forward 2 times. Let's see, whoops, let's go. Okay, so now we're gonna move on to new applications that we've received either towards the end of 2023 or in 2024 that are still in the land use process. In varying stages of the land use process, just to show you what we're looking at this year in terms of new development activity. The first is the lodge at Lacey Apartments. This is off Carpenter Road. If you remember, we talked, I think, about Serenity Apartments last year. This is kind of a sister project to Serenity, 94 units, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. They're gonna be they plan to save lots of trees. They wanna have paths going through the forest. Jeff Powell is the developer on this project. And is really excited about it. Has told us that he wants to build these so that it would be something that maybe he would want to go live in one day. The 3 bedroom units on top. There's some ground floor parking above one of the buildings. Yeah, yeah.
Jeff said that.
Yeah.
They
So by
just
the bus
recently
barn.
cleared. That was, I think that
That was
they,
Carpenter.
yeah. Oh, do you?
By Aldea Glen.
Do ya? I
It's
think
north of
that,
Aldea.
I think they got in there and found some additional trees that needed to come out, or hazard trees that needed to maybe some out. They'll have to do some significant replanting. I think they're in process right now of figuring out meet the niche of the-
Right here, take a right.
Cause it seemed like, yeah, that's the direction they
Like
went.
the 420 late.
They did not go that way, yeah.
That's good to know.
Okay, sweet.
They're
So
back.
site work or land use approval was issued for this project in May last year. And building permits for these projects are still in review, although, as you know, site work is in process, or is in progress.
And they're gonna use the same ingress and egress where's the ingress and egress for these apartments? Cause that's one thing that,
Yeah, so they do have 2, those count as their 2 access points. And then they will access out as the same
Which
location as
is a very
Serenity.
small area.
yeah, and the reason I say that.
I know it's tight.
It's not only it's tight, but it's like on a hill where you can't, like, it's like the worst possible place for ingress, cause it's on that hill and the cars come down, you can't really
Yeah.
see,
It's a challenge on this piece especially. It is a challenging,
right? Because
Yes.
it's a curve on a hill.
their plans are reviewed for site distance with Public Works, and so they have to meet all the site distance requirements for entering and exiting the site. With this parcel particularly, this is really the only location.
Sure.
This is another ownership.
Yeah.
They don't have frontage.
Yeah, they don't have any frontage on Carpenter Road,
Yeah.
but it is a challenge.
I just
Getting out is
Yes.
more difficult than getting in.
Is that where they moved
Yeah,
the old house?
oh yeah, getting out for sure.
The Panaboat House is gonna be the sales office, actually, and it's up here it's right here.
The state application, they're rehabbing it. Yes.
They're rehabbing it.
That's the one that was owner petition.
How old is that
Yes,
house?
yes.
60s?
Yeah, I was gonna say 50s or 60s,
Yeah.
something like that, yeah,
60s.
yeah.
It's 50, so that'd be
It's
almost 80 years.
it's been there for as long as I know.
Jeff is really excited about that. He and Wade talked a lot about the Panaboat House and what Jeff could do with the Panaboat House. Keeping it on the site and using it and restoring it. And then this is another DR Horton subdivision that I think is probably gonna look similar to the Bradley Park. And this is Morel Meadows and it's the Mushroom Farm property. So this has not quite preliminary subdivision approval yet for 179 lots with the lot sizes between 2,700 and 4,000 square feet. So some of these exterior lots are likely even smaller than what we saw at Bradley Park, but it's gonna be a very similar product with those small cottage style houses on the interior. The decision right now is with the land use hearings examiner on with some questions about some of the conditions associated with the preliminary plat. There are oaks, a lot of Gary oak trees on the site. And that was a focus of the hearings examiner's decision and some conditions of approval to make sure those were retained and any loss was mitigated.
Well, well. It's right across from the park, so I was just wondering if it'll be a fully fenced project or whatever, but I guess it doesn't really matter at this point, probably will.
So they'll need to have, this will be open to the back of the, I don't know if it's gonna be fenced or not.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, the backyards will be fenced, but I don't know that the buffer between Marvin Road and the backyard fences will be fenced.
There's an entrance there on Marvin.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Entrance there on Marvin.
There's an entrance on Marvin and then there's an entrance on Stilicum.
Almost
Yeah.
right across from the
Yeah,
rack.
it's gotta line up with the rack likely.
Be close to fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then another multifamily project that recently came in and is just starting its land use review right now. It's Williams Crossing, and this is a piece of property actually that I think we just annexed, right?
Yeah.
Out in the county. And they were the petitioners for annexation. Yep.
Yep.
Because in order to build to this density in the urban growth area, when you're adjacent, you have to be
In the city.
Yeah, so we annexed and they've moved forward with their application. It's 262 multifamily units. It's currently in its land use review process, so the notice has been issued and comments are, the comment period closes on April 25th of this month.
I see our map is up to date with our city limits, isn't it?
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
It is.
Yeah.
GIS. Didn't have to wait for the county to, like I did 20 years ago.
And the next building, I think this is probably like 16, maybe 16, Studio 39 conversion. And this is the old Community Action Council building in Lacey Midtown
Oh, yeah.
behind Paulson's.
Yeah.
And there, the applicant is coming in to convert those to 39 studio apartments.
Wow.
So that also just came in for land use approval or just had its notice issued and has approval comment period through the 19th.
And he's already been doing some internal demo work, right? Does it look like he has construction fencing up and all?
I'm not sure about that.
Who is this? Who's the applicant?
Ken Brogan.
Oh,
It's not Ken Brogan. He sold it. No, he did, and I can't remember who. Brian Easley. I can't remember the name.
but Ken bought it.
He did
Yeah.
to do this, yes, and then essentially sold the project to the entity that's.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay, before we get to the next one, I just want to make sure there's no conflict because I own property in the Lacey Corporate Center, my family.
Oh, this is just an update.
Yeah,
This
just
is
an
an update,
update, yep, yeah.
Never can be too safe.
Question. And it is right next door to you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It's right next door. And then I voted, we had a vote amongst
Oh,
the owners
to
too,
allow.
because it was, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the Intelco Loop multifamily, and this is 240 residential units on 5.7 acres. It's about 29 units per acre. In Lacey Corporate Center, the land use approval on this was issued in November of 2023, and I don't believe we've gotten land use permit or building permits on this. There's been some back and forth with the planner who's assigned to it on some potential changes to the community space that they've proposed. But this is in Corporate Center. Corporate Center has their own restrictions, yes, which prohibited multifamily development. And did the owners agree to lift that then? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's good because
The first time it failed though,
Yeah,
and
okay.
Oh,
there's,
really?
yeah, but they tried again, and so I could think cooler heads prevailed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to have people in there in that. Yeah.
Well, it's like a park, if you don't have people in the park,
Yeah,
then
I
bad
agree.
things happen, right? So,
Absolutely.
Let's see, we're gonna go back to Hogan Bay Commercial. This is a new application as well, and we're almost done. I think this is our second to last. And this application, it's also pending review, recently just came in. I don't think notice of application has been issued on this project yet. It may be waiting for some additional information. But it's 2 hotels. It's immediately adjacent to the Hogan Bay Town Center, just to the south of it on the roundabout. As well as a separate future development tract for additional commercial, which hopefully would interact well with the commercial immediately across the parking lot in Hogan Bay Town Center. And finally, the last project is the Great Cuyo Park project. That was submitted in the last couple of months. We're still waiting on some critical application pieces in order to begin review on this, but the intent is that this would be reviewed in the next few months and get some land use approval issued on Great Cuyo Park so that we can get, the city can get busy working on that project as well. And that's what I have. There's certainly more projects going on out there. I just wanted to highlight some of the bigger ones that we have going on. If you have questions about other things you've seen or about any of these, I'm happy to take them.
I just wanted to comment that I really like this format for the review, as we can kind of follow along on the map, the different things that you're showing us. And maybe like in 6 months, it would be great to have the same format so I could compare the maps as the projects proceed and new projects come online.
Sure. Yeah.
I do think it's,
Yeah.
I do think it's really important that we do get updated on these development projects, because the public ask us all the time what's going on here, and it's like, obviously, we have nothing to,
Yeah,
all this is
yeah.
permitted, and it's like, we're sometimes, we're not even sure, so it's nice to be able to have the information, so at least we can pass along the information.
Yeah, all right, as a new council member, this is extraordinarily helpful, and also, I mean, all in all, a couple thousand units and a 35% increase in business license in 2 years. It just says a lot about the direction of our community. But I did want to ask about number 11 Holcomb Bay, the apartment complex that they were looking. Was that something that was already done in the past, or is that like way down the pipeline?
So the land use approval has been issued. Sorry, I probably should have included that one, but I believe their building permits are in review right now.
Is that something they're looking to move forward with pretty quickly?
I believe so, yeah, yep, sometime this year, maybe. Everything is really dependent for these guys on financing right now.
Sure.
It's really, it's difficult for them to predict when they are going to actually pull their permits and get started working.
This is my favorite part, actually. Counting the new units and seeing what's coming online and so on and so forth, and kind of projecting our numbers and stuff like that. I'm having a hard time placing the Hogan Bay commercial hotels.
It's right there.
Right on the point of Hogan Bay and Britton Park or Marvin Road, and you go take that right past the Mayan.
Look,
Yeah.
right past the Mayan.
Oh, and you take it right there? That's all
Yeah,
left?
it's at that
It's like
point.
across the street.
Across the street from the dog park.
Do you know where the new
Yeah.
Starbucks is?
Yeah.
It's right behind.
Yeah,
It's
it's right
on the other side of the roundabout of
Okay.
the news.
I was thinking that the other side, the hotel that was being considered in Britton Plaza area
Mhm.
would come before us before this.
I thought so too.
Me too.
Yeah, so that was on the bus tour. I had slides on that on the bus tour, and I don't know if it's quite expired yet, but if it's not, that land use approval is very close to expiring.
So they're
And
gonna
they
make a
can get
decision.
extension, right?
They could, they'd need to
It's what,
come to
6
us.
months?
It's a 6-month extension.
It's like, man, imagine, trying to get financing when you did all this and.
Anything else? Okay, well, with that, we've reached the end of our agenda. Without objection, I'll call this meeting adjourned. And as always, you keep it classy, Lacey. Thanks.